I got like 3 girls working for him.
Oh, that's good. All right, it's 2 minutes after 7. We are ready to call this meeting to session. So the first thing on the agenda tonight is to review the meeting minutes from May 11th. And those came out in our emails. I'm going to read that so I can see who's up there. Do we have copies of the minutes or is it just by email?
It was just by email.
Okay.
But I got it here.
All right, so we read through them. From what I remember, that's what happened. Let me see the list of who's on Zoom. It's there too.
No, Damien. Oh, yeah, Damien.
Yes. Okay. So to officially enunciate, John Dwayne, Zach Dixon, and Damian Parkington are all attending tonight by Zoom. So we'll be doing a roll call vote when it comes time.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second it.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Aye, and the folks on Zoom.
John's hands up.
Okay. John, do we need to unmute John from our end?
Are there any board members doing Zoom?
Yes.
So who are they?
John Dwayne, Zach Dixon, and Damian Parkington. There we go.
Thank you.
All right. Would you like to vote on the meeting minutes?
I say yes.
Okay,
Yes.
and yes. All right. I think that's an approved by everyone.
You got Damien. Hey, Gabriel, you got Damien, you got on mute.
Am I a voting member tonight?
No?
Okay, I'll stay muted.
No, I think we've got a full set of people here tonight, surprisingly. All right. 8-0, okay. All right. So then we are moving into the Shellfish department. Discussion and vote on potential change from 14 to 30 days of requesting a public hearing for section 7.13.3 when a grant holder is informed of failure to make minimum productivity.
Okay. I hope you've had a chance to read the memo.
Yes.
Basically, the Shellfish department thinks that the regulation is functioning correctly as is. We had quite a number of minimum productivity instances, I guess, this year. And most of the people didn't ever get, we've been working on this for probably 3 years, and it's a lot of work. And most people communicate back and forth with us, and we don't wind up at this point. That said, we have systems in place to advise people, and with all of the letters that went out, I think 10 letters went out, and it was regarding, I want to say 7 farms, and only 1 person didn't return. it didn't meet the appeal period in 14 days. So I don't think that that's a reason to change what we feel is working, especially because it takes a very long time to even get anybody to that point, and most people don't get to that point. So at that instance, when it's, the use it or lose it is coming into play, we feel like we have spent a long time working with them, and 14 days is adequate. Just prolonging it by giving, 30 days to us doesn't make sense after you've really been trying with people for a long time. And it was not an issue this year, except for one person who didn't do it on time. Everybody else did. But I'm happy to answer questions about it. And I don't know, there's no real consistency in our regulations anyway, because there's two other instances which are not, they're neither 14 nor 30. And the two 30-day time periods we just added in last year. So it's not like there's been something with 30 days on the books before. And when I went and looked through all the other types of bylaws and regulations in town, there's plenty that have different time periods. So I don't think consistency matters in this case. I think it's the situation that arises and the type of regulation that you're doing, that you're enforcing on. I think that is the what requires the time period. This sort of a situation requires a short time period.
Yes, Tom.
You know why it was 14 days? Why- Everything seemed to be 30 days in the regs.
30 days just got added last year. There's nothing that's 30 days in our regs until we
Until
added in the
last year?
domicile reg in June of last year. I don't know why, but I want to get, I put at the end of my memo, I would like to get an intern, and I have somebody in mind, or let's just call him a volunteer if he's willing, to go back and so it's a project that I sent you guys a separate email today with the current regs, and then how, since I've been here, we've been tracking changes. And I think to the best of our ability, it'd be really wonderful to go back through select board minutes and Shellfish advisory minutes and see what was discussed. It would help us, like we've talked about the 18-inch quahog blade a number of times since I've been here, and it's not in the regs, and yet everybody says it used to be. So did it come out of the regs, or why wasn't it put in the regs? I think it's important to understand the context of why something was added. So that's a project that I am hoping to be able to work with a volunteer on. And in a situation like this, yeah, I'd be interested to know why, but I think I already understand why, because of the way the reg is written and because of how long it takes you to get there and how much work it takes to get there, that in the end of the day, you got 14 days to make your appeal request.
Could you remind us again how you talked to the people who had failure to meet their minimums?
So
what was the communications like in general?
So basically what we count as the certified mail, because yes, we had conversations on the phone. So we let people know that this was coming. Personal phone calls to each grant holder named to the grants, letters that were sent, certified mail requesting information. A lot of people, either talked to us about it. Some people sent us information, anything that shows that you're working with us, we're not going to get to this point. So I would say that, phone calls, in some cases, text messages, in-person meetings, in some cases when people don't really use technology, and really an email also. Everything that we did, if I have an email address, everything that went by certified mail, I also sent via email. But we count the certified mail because that tells us that you did receive it.
Okay. Is there a protocol in place for the Shellfish department? Say someone as compassionate as you wasn't the warden, that this wouldn't be surprised on anybody. Oh, hey, you have 14 days, get a quick, that there would be plenty of notice in the future if there was a different warden or a different department.
I don't know. I don't know how somebody else would do it. I don't think that makes a difference with the 14 days in my eyes, like the 14 days. You'd have to work with people over 3 years because the regulation requires 3 years. So you'd have to be tracking that.
To be clear, so it is 3 years till you forfeit a license, but after 1 year, you'll be talking to that person.
We try. It's been, we're getting up to speed because it's a lot. It's a lot of grants, but, by and large, most grants in this harbor are super productive, or you can just tell because they're out there all the time. And so this year, 2022, and was the year where, the culmination of all of our grant inspections and all of the notes that we've been taking, we had this group that was underperforming in our eyes, right? And some people have already made changes out there and, never got to this point. But I don't see this being right now a recurring problem. I feel like people understand that there's a department that's high functioning and that's trying to work in concert with people together to make sure that the regulations are being respected, but to make sure that they're successful. And what else? There's probably going to be some other things, like we always have to monitor it. And the people that we just went through the hearings with, there will be additional monitoring on that. So that will be happening, but I don't think that the regulations are, cut and dry where from one day to the next you could get there, because there's a whole section of the regulations about use it or lose it. And then I guess the actions that would bring you to that point.
Karen, you said a question?
So is there a, what would be the disadvantage of having the extra 2 weeks? I mean, it just seems, making it 30 days, and it doesn't seem like it would be that big a deal. Is there some
I
issue
feel like,
for the department in making it?
yeah, because we've spent a long time and I feel like yeah, that's distracting.
I know, it really
All the
is.
way
It
down.
really is. Like an echo.
Yeah.
Giving too much time when we have invested time, resources, oversight, communications. To me, it's a little bit like, this is it. Like, you have to answer us now. And giving more time feels like obliterating a bit all of the hard work and effort. And it's not just me. It's the entire department. All of us have a hand in it. And it just feels like at the end of the day, we need people to be responsible. And that is a time period that evidently has worked. I don't know how long it's been in there, but we feel like it's the kind of gauntlet where you really have to shit or get off the pot, it's time.
Do we know when the last time people lost their grants this way happened? And I can't remember.
I don't know. And there's just not good records. I have some records in our office from the early 2000s from Bill Walton. I did see some minimum productivity hearings in there, but I don't know.
Anybody else on the board have questions before we start with the audience?
Who decided to bring this up? Board of Selectmen?
Yes,
Yes.
Chair Curley asked.
I'm just trying to figure out who
Okay.
brought this forward.
And
That-
yes,
Was there a specific reason why he brought it forward? Was it just consistency?
That's what I understood, correct?
I believe Ryan has his hand up. So if we're done with asking questions on the board, then we can start with,
Yeah, John.
is John?
Yeah, I just have a question.
Their hands up, sorry.
Who's advocating for this? Is anybody here advocating for the 30 days here?
Ron's got his hand up.
Ryan has his hand up and we're getting to him. And Damien has his hand up and he's on the board, so he's next. Damien muted.
Yeah. Am I able to speak now, Becca?
Yes.
To Nancy, I just was questioning how many certified correspondences are there before the last letter notifying that they have 14 days to have a hearing set?
It just depends on the person. It's different for everybody.
So there's no standard number of there's no standard, what about records of warnings or infraction letters?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the packet from, what was it, May 24th, maybe? You know, each of them had different communications. Some of them had the same communications, but some were different. And some people, you know, got one communication and then got right on it with us and never had, you know, never went forward with other issues, you know, in the procedure for this to enforce this regulation. So it just depends on the situation with the grant holders. Sometimes I will send a certified letter when they haven't, you know, turned in their documentation, like an annual report. I'm trying not to handhold anymore because everybody knows that annual reports and annual fees are due on February 28th. But if you have a renewal or something, and if you've got a bunch of stuff outstanding and we realize it, we might send a certified mail even just about that. But there's no standard because every situation is so different. You've got 100 different farms out there and, you know, a bunch of different people. So we just try and do it as the situation merits.
Did that answer the question?
It does partially. I have to assume that I haven't done and looked at the regulation, but I'm trying to recollect my understanding of it. There's got to be some kind of warning process of, you know, a warning, then a you know, some kind of written, a fine, and then the threat of loss, or does it go right to threat of loss of the license?
Yeah, we
If there's no productivity.
right.
Like,
I mean,
is there?
no, there's multiple communications that would go out. It's not like they just, we correspond in multiple different ways with people. It would never just go out a letter without having had other communications with that person.
No, understood. But what is the letter of the regulation say, if you remember?
It says, you know, you are on notice for not making minimum productivity and you have 14 days to call town hall and request an appeal. You know, to make your case to the select board, because we can't take a grant away at the Shellfish department. Only select board can look over information and make its decision about whether to revoke or allow a forfeiture.
I mean, I guess my only concern follows Becca's line of questioning, which is if it was a different, just imagine a different department. If we don't have a standardized process, it could be that fast. It could just be someone getting a letter going, you know, hey, we've observed over the last year, you haven't met regulation and you got 14 days to make this, you know.
I mean, I don't think you can do that if you have
No.
3 years, so you have to have some sort of documentation. And are you going to ignore a grant holder for 3 years and never reach out? I mean,
Right.
I don't think you can do that and be doing your job. You're on the flats every day. You know who's out there every day.
Stephen?
Did certified letters go up to all the names on the
Correct,
leases?
correct.
All the ones that you did, so every
Right.
person, their name was on a lease.
If
got
4
their
people were on a
internet-
lease, all 4 got it.
Okay,
Correct.
so in other words, there was no just one letter. In other words, it went out to everybody that was involved in it.
Yes, there was a husband and wife and it went to them. They live at the same address.
Okay.
There was one letter that went to addressed to both of them at the same, because they live at the same address, for example, in that kind of a situation.
Okay.
But if there's 4 separate grant holders, Yeah, sometimes if I have actually two different addresses, I'll do, and two different people, I'll do one to one address and one to another.
That's all.
Yep.
It's fine, I guess. So in other words, nothing's being missed, in other words,
Right.
they're being well informed. Okay.
All right, I think we're up to Ryan. Ryan, are you there? And do we need to unmute him from over here?
Okay, so this, back in March, when we discussed how the board would handle, minimum productivity, issues, at the time, I brought up the 30 days, and the board was favorable for that, but we didn't vote on, and we didn't have a amended set of regs at that meeting. So the other type, so for 30 days does establish consistency with the regs, both for the domicile, but also for 11.7, which is the revocation of shellfishing permits. It says the last sentence of that says a public hearing must be held within 30 days to allow a permit holder to appeal the revocation or suspension of said permit. So, you know, a shellfisherman who might be reading the regs could be confused by the two different time periods. You know, are they, you know, we understand the shellfishing permits are, you know, basically wild harvest. And aquaculture licenses are different, but to somebody just reading the regs, it would be challenging. There's really no downside over adding, you know, 16 days. You know, it takes a while to get to this point, and it takes a while to enforce. And then post the hearings, and you know, there's nothing that is time critical. So there, you know, but the other side of the coin, let's say, you know, one person's named to a license, and let's say that they're you know, a scalloper. They could sign for the certified mail on Friday or Saturday. And, you know, if they're later, you know, they're not gonna get through to town hall, or on Saturday, it's not open at all. And then, you know, they could go offshore for 2 weeks. And they would have lost their license. Because, you know, their job essentially. You know, so there's really no downside for and it's kind of, I mean, to say that adding 16 days is somehow detrimental to the actions of the shellfish department is a little bit of a stretch. But I'll just leave it at that. So thank you.
Can I respond?
There was on.
Okay, so just in 11.7, that is not, the person does not make that appeal. That happens automatically, and the shellfish department sets that up immediately. So that's not on the shellfisherman's plate. It has to happen. And we did that in, it might have been 2018, a couple times. So that's a different, that's not in the lap of the person. It has to happen from our office. It might seem like a stretch to you, in all due respect, but I wouldn't have made an issue of this if I wasn't defending the work of Johnny and Chris and Jordan and I, and all of the time and resources that we invest in it. And I also am not sure that people have grants and it's a privilege. And people who have multiple jobs to make their livings here still get out there on the flats and making accommodations because people have other jobs and they just can't get to it. Well, that might be the reason why they're at a minimum productivity situation to begin with. So, I mean, there's lots of people who seem to be able to make it work. These are the instances where people are not making it work.
Helen?
Hi, Helen Miranda Wilson, former member of this committee, former member of the Shellfish Regulatory Board, which I stopped being on last weekend. So, Ryan, can you hear me? Can Ryan hear me?
He's on, he's back to mute.
He's muted, but he's on there.
Okay, I hope so.
Yes.
Yes.
There are a lot of ways, there are a number of ways that people can lose their licenses and or their commercial permits, right? The use it or lose it section. And Barbara Benisel and I were on the committee when we went over that with a fine tooth comb. It already existed. Has this, as Nancy has said repeatedly, a long lead up. And I'd like to remind the committee, the board, that the 14 days is just about having the appeal. Their hearing isn't going to happen in 14 days. That's just when they have to submit the appeal. And the reason I love this form that has been created, and I think it's a really good thing, is when the Shellfish Department, see, it exists. It wouldn't matter who the constable was, right? The form would exist. It's like Nancy's checklist. If you want to get transferred onto a grant, right? Or you want to be on a grant for the first time, Nancy has done a checklist. And if you qualify for everything on that checklist, you're good to go. The select board basically has to give it to you. This form is good
We're not
because
talking about a
if
form, Helen.
you are looking down, I'm not going to say the barrels, but if you have been not meeting productivity, or if you haven't submitted your annual report, and it's 6 months later, by the way, then you're supposed to just lose your license. I don't know if you guys have read the state law lately. It's pretty severe, but if you're not using it, it's been observed for a long period of time. And from the very first probably serious encounter with the Shellfish Department, because the form already exists, you would have been given that form. In other words, there would be an inspection, there would be another inspection, it would be obvious that productivity wasn't being met. There would be all the kinds of exchanges, which, by the way, Stephen, when we, the select board, got the packets for those forfeiture candidates, every single transaction was documented. Yeah, it was really good. It was like all the contacts, and it was obvious that a lot of exchanges had gone on. And so you're in some kind of process with it. You're aware of the form before the 14 days gets declared, right? You know you have that option. So when the forfeiture, notice comes in, you've already got the form. You're not off somewhere not knowing about it. You don't find out about your right to appeal only when you get the forfeiture notice. You know about it before that, and you've not only know about it, but you have a piece of paper if you don't have the technology to do it online. And I really like that. And I take my hat off to Nancy for doing this to make it easier for people in that position. I really like it. It's a good form. And it also is for other ways in which you might use your grant. It isn't just for this one thing, right? And there are how many? 5 different ways? Yeah. In addition to the 11, you know, the section, the enforcement section, 11 point, whatever number it is. Anyway, thank you for listening to me. And you've all seen, did you guys all get the form for in your packet? Right. And by the way, the thing that I said, please put in 14 business days so that that's totally clear. Okay. In other words, you're not going to find about your right to appeal only after you've gotten the forfeiture notice. You will have known about it for months, perhaps years.
Anybody on the board? Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think she makes a good point in that it's not like you get a letter in the mail and then it's 14 days. You know, it's coming for at least 2 years. I mean, you know, you're not filing their annual report, you know, you're not being productive. So, I mean, I would say we should probably add the 14 business days.
Yeah.
That might be a good change, but
14 business days
I don't
makes
see the
sense.
point of making it 30 days.
Nobody else on the board right now, so then we're back to Ryan. Ryan.
Yeah, so the form is your next agenda item. And it's not generated by the Shellfish Department.
Hey, can we turn Ryan up?
Yeah.
Hold on one second, Ryan. We can't hear you.
That better?
That's better.
Yep.
All right, so the form is your next agenda item. And it's not generated by the Shellfish Department. Just to be clear. So thank you.
I would have specified that when we got to that agenda item.
Okay, so somebody did it. It looks good. So do we have any more questions about the 14 days versus 30 days? So what happens at the department? Do you make protocols as you go, saying this is how we handle things so that people who come after you will follow some standard?
I have not had time to do anything
Okay.
like that.
Totally reasonable. It just, I remember the former warden saying, well, what if you have someone who's not as kind as me, who
Right.
doesn't want to make these phone calls, then you have no protections. And I just want to make sure that, because you are really doing a great job of keeping track of all of this, that there's maybe a protocol for other people who come after you, so that we have that protection as well.
I mean, every document that I create is in a folder, so,
Okay.
you know, I
They can choose to
can,
follow it if they
yeah,
choose.
I mean,
Okay.
it's a great idea, and if we have downtime, we can certainly do that too. But everything is recorded, every memo to the select board, every memo to the Shellfish Advisory Board, every communication, you know, scans of things. So if anybody, you know, we actually had a folder that was, you know, minimum productivity 2021, 2022. So like the very beginnings of that, you know, all of those things are there, and then they get divided up into the people's names. We have folders for every person. So it's pretty detailed, and I think people would be able to go look at that very easily and understand how we did things.
So
But
there are
it is a good
protocols going
idea
forward
to
that-
do that. I'm not saying we won't. I just need to find time.
Ellen?
Ryan's right. In other words, this form is an application that gets given to the select board because you're applying to the Shellfish Regulatory Board. However, that doesn't mean that the Shellfish Department can't pass it out. In other words, just so that people really see what it is, it lays it out. And to answer your question, Rebecca, so when we get a new town administrator, and I've been there for quite a few, they have, their job description is not just their job description, which any shellfish constable gets too. It's the charter. It's all the documented regulations and bylaws of the town. It's the select board policies. And that is the thing that any good department head or employee has to look at. In fact, all the employees have to look at the shellfish, the select board policies, which they don't always do. But Nancy, when you came into your job, the regulations were, in a sense, your job description. In my perception of it, you had your job description that's specific to that time and that employee. But what you really have to do was right there in the regs or not.
Mhm.
Thank you.
I'm looking around for hands up on
No,
screens and
nobody's-
table. Okay.
nobody's does
Is there any more discussion?
Okay,
Ready?
so just to be clear, though, there's no like, like number of documents that you always send out. It's, it's sort of up to the Shellfish department.
It's up to the situation, right?
Yeah.
Some people require less. They get one letter and then
Right.
they're
Jump
there
right
and
to it.
working, yeah.
But this is the only letter that's really part of the regulations, that you're going to get this letter that's going to revoke your license. That's what kind of makes me a little nervous, and that it's the only thing that's a part of the regs. I don't know, I guess I'm not really getting what the downside of giving people a little more time is. I mean, some of these grants, have been in these families for generations. Does it really hurt to give them the extra 16 days? I don't know. I guess I mean, if you do look at the other regs, I know they're a little different, but you see 30 days and you see 30 days and you see 30 days. And, I know one of them was new that you just added the 30 days. Maybe you're trying to get more consistency from this point forward. If I can understand Ryan's point where somebody was just looking, they were nervous, they got this letter, they're looking through the regs real quick and they think, oh, maybe I have 30 days. I don't know, I'm just trying to think of the other side. 30 days isn't a lot of time to try to, I don't know, get your final act together and maybe come up with a plan.
When I saw Nancy's note, I kind of knew where she was going to come from. But I always think of consistency.
Yeah.
And, an extra 16 days, it'd probably make her job a lot better, a lot easier too. And then again, I don't know how the process works between the 30 days and then how long does it take to get on a select board agenda? Is that 2 weeks? Just go ahead, Ellen.
To answer the question, it's different for different things, and it should be. But the problem with select board cycles is, although we've been meeting a whole lot more recently, it's typically every 2 weeks. And sometimes you fit in special stuff, but during budget season, there are more meetings. And I'm going to say it again. The only thing about the 14 business days, which is longer than just
Definitely.
14 days, is that's just, you've gotten all these notices and you're already thinking, you know what, you've talked about it with the family or whatever. And you think, you know what, I'm going to surrender this grant. And that has happened since I've been, having my nose in this business. But it's coming and you're already thinking, do I want to appeal this? And the reason for the Shellfish department to have these forms is simply, this is an option. We're going to do this. This is an option. And you've already been thinking about it, whether you want to appeal it or not, and you make up your mind. Now, I know quite a lot about the Shellfish department at this point, but I've been listening and learning for a long time. But if it was just slam bam, like perhaps some of you thought it was, with no lead in, yeah, 30 days or longer, but the select board might not get you on their agenda for 2 months on this, so you're getting the appeal. And by the way, you could submit the appeal form, you could ask to be on the select board's agenda, and then during that time you could say, you know what, we're really just going to surrender this. Do you see what I mean?
Right. Well, I mean, you'd have that option anyways. You just have a little bit longer to decide what you want to do.
I would assume that the annual inspections, they would come out and say, hey, we're not seeing any production. What are you going to do to fix this for like 3 years in a row? So it was coming. Just, I want to make sure that that discussion happens and like, you know,
Yeah,
maybe
it's
somebody who
just one of
comes
those
along
things
next
too
would be
where
like,
If we do go with this
If you're
form.
going to the board, it says Nancy, please speak poorly against it.
Oh, into the microphone.
sorry. There you go.
I mean, I'm just thinking too, if we do go with this form, which is, I know not part of
Mhm.
this discussion, it's the next discussion, but you know, there's a fee of $175. You know, I mean, maybe I'm just poor, but $175, I might need a little more advance notice than, you know, 14 days. So
Well, that's a good point too.
another consideration.
Mhm.
When I thought the 14 days, and I listened to the five, was that five that we talked about the other day? You know, some guys had the broken backs, broken legs, broken arms. And the situation I was thinking of, all right, let me go talk to my cousin. Hey, Joe, you want to help me out, get on the grant with me and we can make productivity. Well, Joe's gonna think about, let me think about it.
Right.
All right, let me think about it. It's gonna take you 2 or 3 days to even think that up because Nancy now has you on a 14-day window. All right, you think about it for 2 or 3 days. Now Joe's gonna think about it for 2 or 3
Yeah,
days.
but you put your paperwork in.
Yeah,
You
no,
don't
no,
wait to hear their
but-
answer. You put your paperwork
But
in.
when a lot of the guys and gals that
Mhm.
came that night were prepared.
Mhm.
Yeah.
They were prepared to
Mhm.
speak to the issue. And I'm just saying, 14 days,
Mhm.
can you prepare? Can you, hey, Joe, let's do this. Why do I want to do this? Well, you can make 60, 65 cents an oyster, blah, blah, blah. And the process in my mind, you're not going to say yes right away. Is where I'm coming from. You're going to say, give me a week to think about it.
Mhm.
All right, now you're into the 2 weeks. You don't want to waste the select board's time. You don't want to waste Nancy's time. You just want to become prepared to debate it with facts and figures. You know, I tried my cousins, nobody wants to do it. I'll give it up.
Right.
Oh, no, I want another chance. And some of the guys and gals committed that they would do another 30,000, 50,000 seat, whatever it was that night. I don't know. I like the consistency. I like to give people more time. But I understand where Nancy's coming from. Hey, she's been doing this for 3 years. You know, what's taking you so long? So you can go back and forth on this.
Yeah.
And last thing is legality. I mean, you know, I don't think we ever, maybe 1 or 2 we had that for what it would with an attorney. You know, would they pick on something simple as, well, everything is 30 days except for this one. So why can't I have 2 more weeks? I don't know. But Nancy came out with good facts.
Nancy?
Just Stephen, because
Oh,
he's had his
I'd like
hand
to
up.
make a
on-
motion.
See it.
Then I'd like to say something. So one of the things is just, it's 14 days to make a phone call to town hall. That's all it is. It's 14 days to call town hall. You know, we put right in there, you can email, you can call, we give the numbers. And then they have plenty of time to prepare. And they can even ask if the secretary says, or the executive assistant says, oh, we'd like to put you on this day. Oh, I need more time to prepare. Okay, we'll do it later. It's not like, there's plenty of time. There's no like, oh, you have to go on this day necessarily. We do try and group shellfish items together to make the best use of the select board's time. But I just thought of something, Karen, to your concern. And so every year we have to do a grant inspection. So every year we would be talking to that person. So that's in the regulations.
Once a year, they would.
That's in the regulations. So they would at least know that.
Okay.
Yep. And it would probably be a number of years of those types of conversations.
Okay.
Ready for a motion?
I'd like to make the motion that we extend it out to 30 business days. Yes, thanks.
Hi, Becca.
Yes, John.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is that it's a simple phone call within the 14 days. Is that it? And then you have more time to submit the form with $175. Is that right?
We haven't gone on to this form yet. Right now, you'd have to make the phone call, right? And then
Yeah, just a phone call.
talk to them and just say that
Right
you want
now.
to appeal it.
All right.
That's all.
That's it.
I'm a little surprised because it's just a phone call because, you know, I would think there would need to be some official documentation.
That's why the form's next.
All right, so if it's simply a phone call within the 14 days and then you guys work it out, how long it is before you submit the official appeal in writing with the amount of money?
Say that again, John?
So the bottom line is you have 14 days, not business days, 14 days to make a phone call to the town hall, just saying that I'm going to appeal the decision. And then you comply, and then, so then how does the actual process work where you have to submit your form with the money? Is that what's coming up next?
That's next.
Next,
All right. But it's simply a phone call,
well, right now,
an email.
Phone call or-
However you want to
All right,
let the
well,
town know.
I don't know how you enforce that.
That's why there's this form now. It's been fine up, but there's a form that we can talk about after.
Should we do the
Right.
form first? Does that contain any information?
well, I mean, yeah, I think,
I don't know.
yeah, I think the concern is if we doing the form second, the way the form seems to be written is that I mean, this form is basically saying that you want an appeal, right? And you're supposed to add your $175 when you request the appeal, I would assume. Is
Yeah,
that what you're asking, John?
I'm asking if you're complying with the 14-day period, as long as you only make a phone call.
Well, that's the way it is right now.
All right, well,
But
then,
this
then I
form
don't,
is on the consideration.
Right, that's next. That's a different thing.
all right, well, then I don't understand why you would need to, as long as you're being notified, 14 days seems reasonable to me.
Okay. Damien, you're next.
Just one question, I think, would any action on this regulation have an impact on any ongoing process?
I don't know what you mean by that. Sorry, Damien.
Anything currently in the
Like,
works?
is there an ongoing, like, would this be retroactive to any ongoing process if it was moved to 30 days?
No, we're not. We've concluded what we did from 2021 and now we'll begin 2022, which will start with conversations during grant inspections and following up. But if I could say one thing, 30 business days is giving people 6 weeks. I liked the compromise of
30 calendar
14
days.
business days,
Okay.
which gives people basically 3 weeks.
I kind of feel like it should be 14 or 30 days. When you get into business days, it gets confusing and easy to miss dates, I feel. And then I just want to share a personal reflection. I recently had something I had 30 days to respond to. I still haven't responded, and I'm weighing all this decision making. I kind of get that with sometimes it's tough to make a decision if you're even gonna make a stand on something. So I kind of get that.
It looks like
Ryan's-
Ryan is next. Ryan.
Yeah, sorry to speak again. Legally, a phone call to town hall is problematic for anything that's of a legal nature. You need hard documentation. And that's one thing that we learned with the minimum productivity enforcement in the past few months, that we needed hard documentation, and so I mean, right now it's reliant on somebody just writing down when a phone call was received. There's no documentation that says, you're basically, there's no formalized process right now, which is very problematic. So I just want you to be aware of that, and that's something that we need to address.
Ellen?
I have to say that, with respect for Nancy saying just a phone call, I thought one of the things about this form, which has you with a date and it gets stamped of when you've requested the appeal. Do you see what I mean? That the phone call, I'm agreeing with Ryan, is really, it's written on Jello. And you might have somebody like Jean McLaughlin who was aware and, noting it down, or you might not, because there's transition in town hall. And that's one of the things this form, which again, the person's going to have, or the grant holders are going to have been aware of this form and the process for a long time before, the clock starts ticking. And I'm very glad that somebody said 30 days is really 6 weeks, which is way too long. And I think the focus on it is good. And I at first agreed with the idea of it being 30 days. And then I really thought about it. I took it apart. I looked at all the other sort of processes. And you know what? I refuse to dumb down for the smart people in the shellfishing community. They are able, in my experience, to focus well on stuff that matters to them. And this form helps it be clear, and it really helps it be clear for a shellfish department that may not have the personnel that's there now. So I really think that the form will solve a lot of these problems, and the 14 days, which is really longer than 14 days, can work. Especially if you're handed the piece of paper and you've had your hand held in a good way, because remember at the end of the form, it says, hey, you can even get help. You can get help from both the select board's administrative office, right? And the shellfish department. There's help out there, and the numbers are on there and everything. Thank you.
Stephen, you want to reword your suggestion, or do you want to stick with it?
I'm sticking with 30 business days.
30.
30 business days
Business
is
days
long.
or 30 calendar days.
That's fine with me. 30 business days or 30 calendar days.
Yeah,
Tell you what, we'll make it calendar
yeah,
days.
I'd say if we make it calendar
Gives you
days,
a month.
I'll second.
All in favor, and we need a roll call vote. So,
Becca?
oh, John.
Yeah, can I just ask people to speak into the microphones? The rest people here, it's hard to hear.
Okay.
All right.
If you say a little something.
John, the motion is to go to 30 days being a calendar days versus business days. So in other words, you get a month to get your stuff in order.
Okay, and I seconded.
Okay.
All right, let's let the Zoom guys vote first. So that's John
No.
and Zach
No.
and no, Damien's an alternate. Ethan
Yes.
Steven?
Stephen, yes.
and Tom
Yes.
and me, no.
Yes.
Karen was a yes, and
No, I'm not voting.
you're not voting tonight either. Okay.
Wait a minute, Nick's not voting?
Oh,
No, because he's an
Oh,
alternate
I'm
too.
sorry.
Yeah, we
You
got a
said
full
no?
board.
You said no?
I said no.
So we got 1, 2, 3 no's and 3 yeses, right?
I think 3 yeses.
Wait.
Vote yes, Karen?
Yeah.
Karen voted yes, Tom voted yes.
4 of us on something, 4.
John said no, Zach said no, Damien doesn't vote, Nick is an alternate, no.
We do. 2, 4.
Who did we
4
miss?
yes.
Did you vote? Do you remember them?
Was it 4 to 3?
1, 2, 3.
Still can't hear.
We're still trying to figure out how
We're
many.
still doing math
The
there.
votes.
It's Matt.
John and Zach said no. Ethan, yes, Tom, yes. Oh, Stephen, yes.
Yes,
There you go.
4 to 3.
4-3.
All right.
I will put this in the memo to the select board.
All right.
Becca,
Yes,
what was the vote?
4-3 in favor. Okay, so now we're moving on to the form.
Yes.
Nancy,
Okay,
would you like to
Does
introduce it?
anyone have an extra copy of the form?
yeah, right here.
Here, you can pass that down and I'll take it.
Thank you.
So as Ryan mentioned, this form was created by Town Hall. And
Oh, sorry, Helen.
because there were no systems in the regulations and no systems in place for getting a more accurate representation of what was going on and having documentation. And the Shellfish Department agrees that this is a good idea. When I started to edit this document and incorporate some feedback from Helen, which was greatly appreciated. And I started to look at it in a bigger picture sort of way. All of us became a little bit uncomfortable with the amount of detail. And in particular, I will say that I added in the issues for the appeals, but then really, okay, so the front of this is the Shellfish appeal requirements. Sorry, the one that says for administrative use only. So this is the issue for appeal. So I did that because I felt like there were more instances than just the one. But it got a little confusing to me. Maybe we just do it for the minimum productivity 7.13.3. Maybe we just do it for that. And then, but I'm not sure, maybe we do separate ones for the domicile exception. I don't know, or we could find a more streamlined way to have it incorporate. But 11.7 probably shouldn't even be there because it's not on the, I just wanted to show it, but it shouldn't be there because it's going to be automatic. And then on the back, all of these documents, I just feel like we're putting an awful lot on the person. And, you know, part of it, yes, documented proof of payment, date of payment, but the annual reports, I don't know, some of this maybe because then it's not up to, you know, the Shellfish Department to be making all these copies, but I don't know, this is stuff that, you know, a lot of it we would put together anyway. I'm not really sure, like I've already said that I'm not sure about, I know that annual reports are public records, but sometimes we hesitate to share people's business information publicly. But I understand that it could help in decision-making. So what we had tried to do in our minimum productivity hearings that we just did is compare annual reports to grant inspections and give the select board bulleted points. I also wonder, you know, is any select board member really going to read through? Like if we had 5 minimum productivity, an annual report is 4 pages long. So that's, I think it was going to be like 200 extra pages if I did 10 years of them. Nobody's going to read that. So we had already, without thinking about that, had already started down the road and had basically finished doing the comparative bullets between grant reports and grant inspections. But this just started to feel like a lot. And I understand why the town would want the applicant to pay the $175 to advertise the public hearing. I get that. I felt like that was, when I read that, that's the thing that said, I got to take this to Shellfish Advisory, because I think that this needs to be a community discussion and a community decision. So I got a little bit down in the weeds on this. I'm not sure we need all of it. I think simple is better. What we're trying to do is create a record of somebody having called and requested an appeal. But I did want to put forth the very good work that my colleagues in town hall did at Ryan's suggestion, and I appreciate it because there was nothing to specify it earlier in our regulations. So we just did the best job we could. And, you know, Helen also dedicated time as she does to these things, and I appreciate all the feedback.
Anybody on the board have some thoughts about it?
Where'd the 175 come from?
I don't know. I'm imagining that's what it costs to advertise a public hearing in the paper. Notifying abutters, maybe that doesn't need to be in there. I bet this was copied and pasted from another, like a planning board or a conservation commission. Thank you for having me look at that again. So that probably doesn't need to be in there, but maybe what I can do is ask how much does it cost to advertise either in the Independent or in the Cape Cod Times, and just do, you know, up to
Yeah, right.
a certain amount. So I can ask about that.
It seems like this form is trying to hit too many things at once.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can definitely see the issue for the appeal. They should have that in the office and they can check that off as part of what's going on. But then to cram all of the domicile requirement exception doesn't need to have all of this stuff on the back.
Yeah.
That should be its own form, and it should be, if you check the box for domicile requirements, these are the things you're gonna need. If this is gonna be specifically about the meeting your minimums, then this would be useful information to have on the back for the person who's doing that work, but they should be separate forms for separate situations. But I do like that there's like a sheet that gives you some guidance.
I think we should then, I think
Make this.
the intent of this form was for minimum productivity. So let's just
Stick to that.
yeah, I agree with you completely.
Does it add a lot of work to, probably not at this point, the Shellfish department, if it's asking for annual reports and you did great summaries, does it, because I think you're right that the annual reports are just a whole lot of papers that people aren't going to read, but getting summaries, like, is this what the person themselves is supposed to provide, or is this just, okay. Damien, your hand is up. Damien, are you there? Nope.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute or hit the wrong button. Along the lines of what you were just saying, I like the idea of having the formula top page with a list of things that you check off pertaining to what you check off. You're given the, you know, the appropriate other pages, consecutive pages that, you know, can have a list of actions or whatever you're going to do. But that the top page being what you turn into town hall, that is your notification that, you know, for the hearing or for review or whatever it is.
Excuse me. So Damien, are you saying to kind of leave the front page the way it is and they would check off which it is, and then depending on what they check off, they'd get a backup document separate?
Correct. And that
This
the
could
front
stand
page,
almost as, okay.
and the front page could be what they turn into town hall to note, you know, to notify that they're gonna, you know, would like to appear before the select board.
I mean, we could almost finish just with that, right? I mean,
Yeah, just make that.
7 copies. Yes, Helen.
Yeah, and by the way, I know I'm not on the committee anymore, even though I'm acting as if I was, and if you don't want to recognize me, I won't be offended. But having been on the ZBA and the planning board and been to a whole lot of other regulatory board meetings, an appeal is a privilege. It's also a right. But the copies, asking for multiple copies for everybody on the select board and so forth, that's like just standard regulatory board stuff for applicants. In other words, the appeal The Shellfish Department will have bent over backwards in the sense of showing up for inspections and documenting all that and helping, right? But when you get to the point of doing an appeal, the office for the select board, the Shellfish Regulatory Board, right, has to produce documents for every single one of the people on the board and then some. You know, there have to be more than just the 5 of the people on the board. And yeah, that's trouble. But this appeal process is also trouble. It's the person's right, but it's also a privilege. And I like it. It's in this country. You can do it. So jumping through these aren't hoops. These are things that are needed in order to have that appeal hearing or meeting, depending. And I very much support the idea of having the front of it be what everybody knows about, and then specific handout for these are the things you have to show up with in a checklist kind of fashion like you have here, so that whoever the applicant is, they can really just read it on a piece of paper to make it easy.
So you're
And
saying
the zoning board of appeals and stuff.
this
has that.
page would be step 1.
Right.
Step
Yes.
2 would then be to get the appropriate piece that goes with that, which would have the
Yeah.
material that you need for that portion.
And
Okay.
that's a little more work for the Shellfish Department and, you know, the
Well,
whoever else on staff works on it.
okay, so I have a question. So is this stuff that the grant holder or the appealer is going to have to do, right? This is documentation that whoever's applying for the appeal has to put together, okay? And then if they don't, does that mean they don't get their public hearing? Like, so then what's the consequence? If they don't put all this stuff together in 7 copies and drop it off at town hall, what, is there a timeline on that? I mean, because you're obviously
Yeah,
drawing
it's
on your
adding a lot.
experience on other regulatory boards like Conservation Commission and so
Yeah.
it does, so they don't get it. And then what
Okay,
happens?
Okay, so something that really, I'm trying to get the right word for civil discourse, annoys. Something that regulatory boards don't like is when the applicant shows up with their engineer or their lawyer or whoever, and they haven't submitted the stuff the people on the board have to have for their homework before the meeting. They're told there's a deadline. It has to be submitted the week before so everybody can get their homework. And it's really not okay for the people at the board not to have had a fair look at what the applicant wants you to look at. Okay, it's really important. You know, you want it to go well. You don't want them just telling you about it at the meeting, because not everybody thinks that fast when they're trying to, you know, figure things out and they're sitting at a table.
So basically they'd have to, let's just say, okay, your public hearing is going to be on May 24th, on May, or 23, 22, 21. On May 19th or May 18th at 12 o'clock, you have to have your packet in. And if you don't, then it will be continued.
Yeah, or continued, yeah, if it's a hearing, but a good regulatory board, if they don't have everything they need, I'm looking at Ms. Branisol, who is on a regulatory board now, should say, we can't act on this tonight. And it really stinks when people have paid lawyers, you know, like on the, you know, Conscom or something like that, you know, and the lawyers haven't gotten the stuff in, you know, it's.
Well, it would have to be consistent. It couldn't just be like, you know, it would have to be consistently applied. So there'd have to be some sort of a, you know, a deadline. And if you don't do it, then this happens so that people understand the parameters that they're working within. And concessions aren't being made for one person, but not another.
That's right.
And then what happens then if they don't do it? Do they just get to keep their grant?
No, they don't. But they've asked for the appeal. And if they haven't submitted the paper and it's for a hearing, the paper, you know, the documents, and it's for a hearing, you can continue the hearing.
But then they, like, I think.
To a
Nancy's
date
point,
certain.
They just
Keep
they will hold on to their grant for as long,
Woohoo.
well, I didn't get the documents. I didn't
No,
get it.
no, at a certain, okay,
There
so
has to be some sort of.
that's a good point.
That's where I was
Well,
going. Thank
you know, it's sort of a limbo period. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
You guys figure it out.
Yeah, it seems like there would have to be some sort of penalty for not getting the documentation, right?
Stephen?
We just got this paperwork real recent. I think we need to look at it very seriously. And maybe put it to one of our next meetings. Because there's a lot of information in here that we need to look at seriously. You know, it's pretty tough for me to look at all this in really a night and a half.
Right, right.
In other words, to really understand it all. You know, like we're saying, in other words, a top paper, the back paper, there's a lot to this. In other words, I think you know, if everybody decides that the top paper is great, and then we need to add some to the back of it, different sections, that's great, in other words, but I think to just do it in one meeting, I think it's kind of tough.
Is
Yeah.
this something that we could recommend you bring back to us in several pieces? Do we have time for that? Is that, I mean, we're going into the busy season and we're probably not gonna have a meeting in August. Does this need to be done right away, or is this something?
I think out of respect for the select board chair and just, I know we don't have anything on it now, but it is a positive, you know, at least let's maybe just decide the front so that we have something in place. Should we have a minimum productivity issue between now and the next time that this comes up, at least they can get this.
That sounds like a good.
And then we can deal
for
with the
now.
back at your leisure. I don't know that I will have time this summer to work on 3 separate backup documents, but I think if we get to that point, we can certainly bring it back up.
Would you be bringing minimum productivity up before next winter? Is that something that happens at the turn of the year?
There's no timeline on it.
I'm just
I'd
thinking
have
you're-
to go and look.
Because if that's what we're working towards, is having this ready for the next time that debate comes up.
Well, we have some people that on October 21st, I think, there's a couple of grants, and then there's a couple, I think, December 31st that,
Okay.
you know, we're going to need to be monitoring and making sure that they've met minimum productivity. So even if I just had the top form,
Right.
and then
When we get to the.
we can always
of it
just
by
communicate
September.
with them if we decide
Mhm.
that you want the other stuff to be in there, I can just communicate that to them when we get there. But it gives you guys time to,
So the priority at this point, though, is this front page, so
Right.
they have some sort of documentation that people request an appeal, I think is the main goal.
Okay, so if we all agree to work on the front page tonight,
Yeah,
for the
so
most
if we
part.
can figure out the front page, we can at least.
and I would take
on
away the
that.
notice.
Yes, I'm
If we're
seeing.
just gonna do this, I would take away the
Right.
notice at the bottom.
okay,
Take away this applicant shall
we-
provide.
Yeah,
service.
because
squeeze
it's
in
just,
other-
it's really just something to
Plan
submit to
doesn't
town
have it.
hall. So there's a written,
Right.
right, okay.
a written
So
copy.
It
that-
looks like Damien has something. His hand is up.
Yeah, thanks, Becca. I wanted to throw this out there because it's kind of on my mind, but it sounds like this would, like language that calls for the select board to have a set time frame to deal with it, say 60 or 90 days. Isn't that part of the domiciled language anyway?
That the select board needs to deal with it in a certain time.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, right.
And the bottom of the back page says the public hearing or business agenda item at a select board meeting will be held within 60 days of request. But that appears to pertain to
Where's that?
the very last line on the back page.
See?
Okay, so that was something that was added. That's not currently in the regs.
It's not.
Okay. But there's also all original documents submitted with this appeal need to be timestamped by clerk, which with this appeal makes me want to change my vote on the last timeline. Okay, so on the front page, we still have
Oh, we have Ryan.
Ryan.
Huh?
Can't hear you, Ryan.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Yep, sorry, I'm in the habit of muting myself, so. Um, so as to what the requirements are, the select board hasn't really taken it up yet. So I would recommend that, allow the select board to see what they would like for minimum or what they want for documentation. And then we can refer that part of it back to the Shellfish Advisory Board. The requirements, I didn't have any or anything really to do with that, but in terms of some of these appeals, they don't specify in the regs when the select board should act on or take them up. There is a requirement that for applications that meet the requirements for an aquaculture license or receiving an aquaculture license, select board will take it up within 65 days. However, for many of these regs, I mean, minimum productivity, there is no defined time period of when the select board would have to take it up. It could be, I mean, it's kind of up to the select board, and who knows, somebody might wait 120 days. Right? There's no deadline currently, and I don't think that's really to the benefit of anybody. You don't want to have people twisting in the wind. So maybe that's something to look at in the future, is defining time periods as to when the select board should hear certain I would say public hearings that are applied for. But
I think that we could tie to that, if that was the concession of the select board, that they thought that that was the best interest of the town and the fishermen, we could tie to that a requirement that, so the select board has to schedule you within 60 or 90 days, that, along with the scheduling, if you don't have your documents, to the select board within your, 2 weeks of your date, once they've scheduled you, so I guess that, but that would put like a constriction on the select board to serve notice, I guess, of at least 2 weeks.
Seems to me that this should just be, the first page should just be a standalone form. Like Ryan was saying, maybe a phone call isn't good enough, and this would just serve as proof that you did file an appeal, that it was stamped. And then, you can kick the rest of it back to either the Shellfish Department or the select board as to what they want in terms of documentation. I mean, it's also up to the person making the appeal to bring as much documentation as they want. I mean, they're the ones who are doing the appeal, so. I would just say, standalone form for this, just so file with the town clerk, there's proof that it was done within the time period.
All right, so the first page looks good. The notice at the bottom, was that being moved to the back page? That doesn't, we're getting rid of that on this form.
That would probably go, I think it really should go with the, yeah, with all the other stuff, because it's 5 for the, each of the select board, and then 1 for town administration.
Yeah, I
one
mean,
for
as
the
long as this is filed
department.
with the town clerk, I think that would be enough.
Yeah, I would think so.
So if the front page is just gonna be what they have at the desk when somebody calls in, does it need to say the 7 copies? Or does it just
No,
need to
that's the
have?
part we're saying.
Okay,
no.
so we're taking that out.
Yeah.
So then the appeal requirement would need to go on the front,
Oh, right.
right? Which is where we're talking about $175.
Second page, top of the second page. With the signature.
And that, yep, thank you. That'll move to the front.
And we need to know where the
And then we need to know where
175
the
comes from.
175 came from.
and just to add something real quick. So, we'll be discussing the form, and if the select board is, agreeable, to capturing it this way, then we would, because it's a fee, the 175, we would have to post a public hearing, for the fee or to adopt the fee into our fee schedule. Just so you're aware.
Well, do they all require public notice though? Because that's what it says in terms of the fee. It says if appeal does not require public notice, payment's not necessary. Yeah.
But anything with a grant requires a public hearing, so there would have to be an advertisement at least.
Okay, so it would just be like a commercial shellfish.
So was revocation of shellfishing permits the 11.7? That was implying wild permits, right? We think
Say that again, sorry.
the 11.7 is wild permits, right?
That's correct.
Okay, so then we're gonna need a section to put in that number too, don't we? Or some,
That can come out because
Okay.
that is.
That one's gonna-
the-
just gonna
The
come out,
way the
okay.
regulation is written
That's
is
all
that
right.
we'll get,
okay.
yeah.
All right, so they
So
don't need
that
to do a
one's
form
coming
for
out.
that. Okay. So then it will be related to an agricultural license and you're the if. Actually, no, because domicile requirements is also
For wild.
for wild, so, okay.
Okay, so I asked Rebecca Eldridge and I said, do you know where the $175 fee came from for the appeal? And she said that was an estimate because the ad can cost up to that if it's not posted in time.
Oh,
So it's for the advertisement. And then, so what I would do is change the language to say for, not for processing, but for publication of legal notices of the public hearing. So, and then I'll get rid of appeal. Well, if appeal does not require a public hearing, then payment's not necessary. For example, for a wild shellfishing domicile thing. Yep.
okay, that looks good. Yeah. Do you need us to vote on this?
I think so.
You think so?
I just thought Ryan said he wanted to select board to look at this. And then he would bring it back to the SAP.
Ryan.
That's the way I heard. Did you do that? That's the way I heard it.
All right.
Hey, Ryan, can you comment on that?
Yeah, so the select board hasn't discussed this yet. I would assume that, the discussion about basically what you guys are referring to is second page with requirements for different things. That's something that the board will need to discuss, and then we can refer it, I guess, back to the SAB, because the board might say we don't see why we need one of something on it, or they might say we want something that's not currently listed. We don't know. So
am I bringing the front page to the select board to start, or what's the next step, I guess?
I would do both, but for the front page for adoption, kind of, and then the second page for discussion, and then I think that makes sense.
Thanks.
So we don't have to vote on the front page as amended. Okay.
But are you gonna vote on the front page or make a recommendation to the select
Asking.
board?
Nope.
I think they like that.
Sure. Let's take a vote. Does anyone want to make a motion
What are we voting on?
The front
to
page
recommend the
adopt
front
it.
page as amended?
And the select board is not going to go over that again?
And they
or
are going to go over it, but they might like our opinion on it.
All right.
So I will move to recommend the first page as amended.
Second.
Seconded. All right, roll call vote, starting on the Zoom. John
Yes.
and Zach. Zach still here?
That is not here.
Not here, okay. All right, Ethan,
Yes.
Stephen,
I'm gonna sustain.
Yes.
me, yes.
Yes.
He's not voting yet. Okay,
Karen, you said yes?
I said yes.
so one abstain and the rest of us liked the front page.
And
Okay.
Nancy could take care of that with the changes.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to horseshoe crabs. Shouldn't take long.
We should have done that first.
I guess that's me. I don't know why this was put on the agenda, but we did have some discussion, John Dwayne and I, with some others about horseshoe crabs issues in the state. So I can give you a very brief update.
Okay.
I think only Becca was on the SAB. Helen was when
John
we.
was.
And John was when we petitioned the state for moratorium on horseshoe crab harvest in Wellfleet Harbor. And we also petitioned for lunar closures on the full and new moons. And they denied our petition for the moratorium, but they allowed the closures on full and new moons, even though there's no evidence that Wellfleet horseshoe crabs are really spawning exclusively on new and full moons. They seem to spawn whenever the weather's nice. It was based on some studies in Delaware Bay. There have been some other attempts in other states to ban harvest from beaches. In Connecticut just last month, the legislation was failed to limit horseshoe crab harvest from beaches. We still have in Massachusetts a biomedical horseshoe crab harvest. The Associates of Cape Cod has been the leaders here. They're in Falmouth, and they're owned by a Japanese conglomerate, by the way. And they now have a recombinant factor to replace horseshoe crab blood in biomedical testing. And another recombinant factor has been developed and is in use in Europe, and by Eli Lilly and some other big pharmaceutical companies are now using recombinant factor. So this might be a good thing for horseshoe crabs because companies will switch to that, but it'll take many years because you have to train people and they have to get new equipment and it costs a lot of money. So just when we thought that, okay, that's going to happen and horseshoe crabs won't be needed for biomedical in maybe 5 to 10 years, we found out that Charles River Labs just bought a facility in Harwich and got a permit to bleed horseshoe crabs in Harwich. So they're going to try to harvest as many crabs as they can before the biomedical product, the recombinant product, is approved for use. I heard through the grapevine that they've contracted with one fisherman from Chatham exclusively. I'm not going to divulge his name, to harvest for them. And so that biomedical harvest will continue. Most people don't have a serious problem with that because it's really needed for vaccines. It's needed for almost everyone here has benefited from the use of horseshoe crab LAL for biomedical testing. And I'm happy to say that it might be phased out within 5 to 10 years. But the big concern is the bait harvest. Bait harvest is banned in New Jersey and South Carolina, even though they have more horseshoe crabs than we do here, which is kind of amazing. And they do that because they want to preserve whatever horseshoe crabs they have for biomedical.
Makes sense.
It does make sense. So if any new appeals were to come from Wellfleet or any place else, there is a need to make a case. So you need some information, you need some data. DMF isn't just going to listen to us saying, oh, we love our horseshoe crabs.
we need to have some data. And there is some 10 to 20 year survey data that's been done on the spawning beaches that various organizations have. But there isn't a lot of historic data which gives us an idea of how abundant horseshoe crabs were in the past. Everyone says, oh, I used to see them all over the beaches. All the shellfishermen, the growers were saying they were all over the place, but that's not going to convince DMF that now we see fewer. So we do need some more information. There isn't even one word about horseshoe crabs in the Curley report, which described the flora and fauna of Wellfleet Harbor. It wasn't even mentioned. So that's one of the things that we have to work on in terms of the groups that are interested in trying to ban the bait harvest. So I just want to outline a couple of strategies that people are talking about. One is to ban all harvest, biomedical, bait on beaches and trawls. And I don't think that's going to fly at all with DMF. So that would be the most stringent kind of ban. Another is to ban just the bait harvest and keep the biomedical, which is more palatable, I think, to certain people. The only other fisheries that are affected by the horseshoe crab bait harvest are the whelk and eel fisheries, which are seriously declining anyway. Currently, the limits set for whelk do not allow the whelk to reproduce, so that population is really crashing anyway. Another strategy would just be to ban the bait harvest from the spawning beaches, but allow the trawlers to collect crabs for the bait. So there are all different levels of strategies that could be used in terms of trying to conserve horseshoe crabs. And the last thing I want to mention is that Wellfleet tried to do it alone last time. And I think that we did a good job. We had a hearing. We went all the way to the DMF advisory committee, but we didn't quite make it. But now there are a number of other organizations that are seriously thinking about trying to do something. And I think having an alliance or a coalition with those other groups may be much more effective than Wellfleet trying to do anything alone. That could be Wellfleet and neighboring towns like Eastham and Orleans, or it could be Cape Cod Bay, because all the towns on Cape Cod Bay are seeing a serious decline, not so much on Nantucket Sound. So if the Cape Cod Bay groups, including Plymouth, Duxbury, all around the bay, got together, which some of us are thinking of doing, it may be much more effective way to approach the Division of Marine Fishery. And then you could also, people are also talking about statewide bans or even New England wide bans. So there are all sorts of people talking about it now. A lot of people are concerned. A lot of people are seeing declines in their horseshoe crabs. So there's a Southeastern Pine Barrens Alliance that wants to do something in Plymouth. There's a Horseshoe Crab Recovery Coalition that wants to do something coastwide. So a lot of groups are now trying to strategize as to how to prevent these 400 million year old creatures from going extinct, which is basically what's happening. They're on the path to extinction. So that's just my report. I've been talking to some people, but I don't represent anybody. I don't represent the Audubon. I don't represent Wellfleet. I'm just giving you information. I'm a volunteer. I do spawning surveys in the National Seashore where I see hardly any crabs. Our last survey is next week. We've got a lot of zeros on our surveys. So if you're interested, or if there's someone at SAB who wants to work with any of these groups, if there's that interest, I can put you in contact with them. But otherwise, when it comes up, you can ask me and I could give you an update, something like that. But I don't want to take up too much more time, but I'll answer any questions that you might have. Stephen?
Doesn't the state have only a few permits left, in other words, because they're limited access?
It's
They're not
limited,
giving no more out, right?
right, limited access,
Does-
right.
Do you know the number on how many there are?
I can look it up. I don't know offhand, but there is
Okay.
limited access, right?
I'm just wondering if these permits are being used, very heavy, or some of them just are holding on to these permits. That's what I was, like you were saying, for the farmers, the
Right.
medical world, these permits might be very, beneficial. But then, like, as you say, for the bait, that might be a situation where we need to restrict it a little more.
Yeah, I think there was only 1 year. I don't know the number of permits, but I think there was 1 year when the state exceeded its quota totally. Most of the time, they don't even reach the quota because there's so few.
That's why I
Crabs.
was wondering.
And they also have a rent-a-crab program where if someone sells the horseshoe crab to the bait dealer can rent them out to the biomedical companies. They can bleed them and then they go back
for bait.
for bait.
Okay.
So there are all sorts of permutations of
Didn't
this
they find there was
industry.
a really high mortality in the ones that they took and bled and then returned to nature?
The state puts out a 15% mortality, and that's what they calculate into their figures. But some studies show up to 30% mortality. And some studies show that even if they live, they can't reproduce. They're so depleted. It's like if you've been bled and just, don't have the energy to reproduce that year. So there are other consequences aside from mortality with the biomedical industry. Other questions?
Ellen, do you have a question?
Well, I was there too, and this committee did an incredible granular job on this. We got testimony, and the thing that sparked it was the bamboo worms. And, they wreck the bottom. I don't know how many of you are aware of what the bottom gets to be like. And this committee, your committee, really got into it. And what we really hit was a firewall put up by the Welk lobby, the Welk industry. Sure, there are people that want to support themselves, and I get all that. The only thing that Barbara didn't say, and I was there for all of that, and thank you for writing it all down and telling them, because I would have, fainted if I'd had to do all that, is that in Pleasant Bay, right next door, they got a moratorium on bait. And there was just the biomedical harvest, and the population rebounded. It really worked. And right now we have fewer than when we tried to get this moratorium years ago. What's the name of the organization in New Bedford that, what's her name? The horseshoe crab. That organization that sort of spearheads knowing about it and, militating for the protection. Yes, the horseshoe crab conservation. We had them come and speak to us and give us data, and it sort of dissolved after a while, except that we had been told that the surveys that had been done by Audubon for years weren't up to speed. So Barbara, when she was still on the committee, you worked with those guys from Audubon, right? And from the state too. How many years did that go on? Yeah.
They're still going on 20 years.
No, remember when the guys from the state who usually did lobster came?
Yeah, they do. Yeah, there's no way to tell if any of the conservation strategies are working, because these crabs take 9 to 10 years to mature. So if you do something now, you're not going to know for a decade whether you're, and I just want to clarify something about Pleasant Bay. Yes, it's biomedical. Yes, they have a lot of crabs, but they're mostly males. So it's like 10 males to every one
Because
female.
they're taking the largest females for the
for the
biomedical bleeding.
Right. So yeah, there are a lot of crabs
They're
there.
all the eggs.
And the bamboo worm thing, the DMF said, well, you have no data.
We did.
No, you need data, not anecdotes, Helen.
Yeah, we'll have to get some
So
GoPros
what
out
we
there.
found was species just like our bamboo worms. There was data from California that horseshoe crabs eat that kind of stuff and they wouldn't accept it.
That's right. Okay. Damien.
Yeah.
See your hand up. Is it still up?
Yeah, I just,
Okay.
I was gonna just share some observation. To my knowledge, the majority of the bait fishery occurs in Nantucket Sound. I don't personally know any dragoman in Cape Cod Bay that target them. There may be some guys up north, Situate North Shore that do, but
Yeah, I think you're right, because there are more crabs in Nantucket Sound than in Cape Cod Bay. So most of the trawlers work in Nantucket Sound.
yeah, I think most of it's a bycatch of the fluke fishery. It becomes a targeted species. I'm aware of that, at some points. But it sounds like environmental factors that are affecting Cape Cod Bay, unless it's the same biomass that shares both waters, but it still would seem like an environmental circumstance that keeps on bringing them into the sound and not into the bay and not into Wellfleet Harbor. I'm not aware of any fishery in Wellfleet Harbor. I think there may have been shots at it at certain times maybe, but I've never seen anyone target them or heard a catch coming out of there.
Well, people have seen them out there catching them for bait, so for years. So we know it's happened, but we also know that last time we checked with the state, it was the number of harvesters was so small that they couldn't give us data
From Wellfleet.
from Wellfleet
Yeah, they
specifically.
couldn't give us the
Yeah.
Wellfleet data.
Could they give harvest data though? Without sharing, they couldn't give any data on catch?
No, if it's less, it's 3 or less, they will not share any data at all.
It's like it has to
What
be
about data
recognized.
from the entirety of Cape Cod Bay?
Yeah, less.
That we could get.
I think it's 3 or less.
I think it's 3 or less for the
I
entire.
know permit holders myself,
Mhm.
and they're not targeting them. They're just holding on to the permits because they know that they're limited access, and that's the only reason why they're holding them.
I have that endorsement attached to my cap permit. It's not used.
There you go, see?
Right, I think this is some of the information that these alliances and coalitions would like to gather in
Right.
terms of going forward with any kind of suggestion to have limited bait or no bait harvest from the beaches or anything like that.
I mean, I can see like if you're bringing up mangled bycatch that's not going to live anyway, you might as well sell it. But. Yeah. All right, well, thank you for bringing the information. Do we have anybody else with questions? I don't see anybody. That screen is too far.
I'll
away.
actually add one thing.
Yes.
In the Curly report, possibly our gear type didn't target the horseshoe crabs. So this time around,
Mhm.
we add some other component in,
Mhm.
and that could be why they were
Yes.
underrepresented.
Oh, yeah, that should definitely be added. Not already.
Becca?
Yes.
Yes, the only other thing I'd comment I'd make is that DMF, we tried to, ban it. We're advocating a ban in Wellfleet Harbor. And it's gonna be a tough lift with DMF to try to get anything changed. It's gotta be a statewide regulation. They don't regulate by embayment, so it would have to be, you can't just do, I don't believe you can just do Cape Cod Bay. It would have to be statewide. So the folks down in New Bedford would be under the same state regulations regarding horseshoe crab harvest.
But Pleasant Bay has its own regulation. Right? So that was one embayment that was allowed to change that. Is that because they're on?
I don't know how that all came about, but it does seem to be different.
I think that's that
I don't know if that's just
because of the biomedical.
Okay.
Yeah, that doesn't have to do with commercial harvest for bait.
Mhm.
And I guess I would ask, is there anybody here that's representing the Wellfleet bait harvesters here tonight?
No.
I think, yeah, everybody can see anecdotally that they've diminished remarkably since, the sixties. But I think that unless we're proposing anything, we need to revisit how we would go about it.
No, I don't think there's any proposals tonight. This was just sort of an update because it's been a couple of years since we've discussed what's going on. So. Anybody have any other questions, or are we pretty much done? Thank you very much for coming and talking to us about that.
Thanks, Barbara. Thank you.
Nice to see you again. All right, do we have, we just need a
Future topics.
future items and set an agenda, set a next date.
Future topics.
So future topics. The second side of this.
I'm gonna start out with, is Powers Landing listed as a landing for pickup for oysters?
In
My
Vibrio
first
season,
question to be asked.
in Vibrio season.
Yep.
Yep,
It is,
yep. That happened a couple of years ago.
so it is on the books that it is allowed.
It's
Okay.
always allowed under DPH rules. It's always allowed to pick up shellfish from a landing
Okay.
under DPH rules, but we have ours at the pier during Vibrio season. And this came up, I don't know, it was like maybe 2 years ago now,
Okay.
but it was before COVID.
Well, now,
Yep.
now that we have dredging, we have a lot more congestion at the marina. So maybe some of the people would like to be able to offload their product into a truck in a different location than the marina, because we are really getting tight for space down there. In other words, there's gonna be days that you're gonna show up to expect a truck on the marina, and there's not gonna be a parking space for the truck or you to drop your product off to it because of the amount more congestion. We haven't had a high influx of launching people yet. It's slowly happening. So we could be ended up with a day that all the trailers are in all the trailer spaces and the center line is full. And there ain't a parking space for the people that are supposed to be transferring their oysters. I think we're gonna end up with a congestion problem. It could end up not good, in other words.
I think
That's why I'm saying, in other words, I think that we have to look at it as we need to make sure that there's alternative locations. We have a spot that's been approved over at the jetty, right?
I'm gonna have to let Nia remind me about this.
Okay.
I'll have to look back into
Understand what I'm
that.
trying to say? In other words, where there's a
Yes.
different parking lot that if
But
we
just
can't.
remember, those are also bathing beaches and they're packed at all times.
Well,
So
we might need to look at it a lot more serious. I understand Powers Land is a bathing beach too. I understand that.
yeah, you know how it
I
is getting
understand.
in and out of there.
I
It's
understand that.
always hard.
But I think that, I think we need to look at it a lot more seriously, because now that we've got dredging, the people that are paying to be in the slips and the moorings, they're putting more burden on them using the parking lot. And that's, in other words, it could be an outcry on their end of it, stating that move on, in other words. So I think that we need to look at trying to take the congestion away if we could. That's all.
You're looking at me, but you're bringing it up as a future topic for this like
Yeah, I know that.
advisory to discuss.
I know that.
Okay, good.
I know that. For the advisor.
I have a quick question for Nancy.
Because the other people in town might want to speak in on it.
How many locations do we have? I was unaware there was anyone other than the pier.
Yeah, during Vibrio season, we're supposed to be using the pier, but Mike Parlante asked if he could do it at Powers Landing, and DPH said yes. And that's as far as we got. We never explored any of the other landings, even though they had also been brought up.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, I would just say that Powers is probably not a good choice for an extra one. I mean, I know Mike's the only guy who uses it. And, I go down to the pier in the summer to meet the truck, and rarely it's an issue. Maybe that'll change, but I would say not Powers Landing.
Yeah, sometimes I can't. park there.
Yeah, because people park triple wide.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, they just put that new line, so maybe it'll change, but
Yeah.
people park in the middle and you can't get a truck in there even.
Yeah.
It's
so.
horrible.
I had I sent out a crier yesterday, and so this is really just an announcement. It's not a topic for a future agenda, but tomorrow night, the select board is going to be meeting on the
Yes.
watershed permit. And I think it would be good for people to be there and hear how it, from all of the things that were discussed and tossed around to what's being submitted. And I know that as an addendum, I don't know if you remember, I want to say it was last year before town meeting, maybe in the spring, we had a couple of meetings with Scott Horsley, and he came and he presented,
Mhm.
and then we presented basically, it's like a supplemental propagation plan. So we're not approaching nitrogen mitigation using shellfish like any other town has done. We are blessed with wild oyster reproduction, and we have been noting, and shellfishermen have told us that they are noticing wild quahog reproduction from the contaminated relay, especially in Chipman's Cove. So what Johnny and I, we worked with over 2 years with 2 different groups of Scott Horsley's graduate students. And we came up with a plan for rotating closures where we would do heavy inputs of culch and seed and contaminated clams, close the area for 3 years, and then the next year do another. So these would be rotating closures that would open after 3 years. They would not be sanctuaries. And we feel like this could be a really good way to do concentrated efforts that our budget wouldn't allow us to do, but by tapping into the watershed permit budget, we can, and it will be something that we can absolutely manage. So of course, we wouldn't open it in September and October and November. We would open it, let's say, in March and April when the markets need product. So there's all sorts of things that we put together and we presented here, and we didn't ask for a vote at the time because there was nothing to vote on. It wasn't being presented anywhere. But I think he came twice, and I think the Shellfish Advisory Board supported the work and Johnny and my efforts to think outside the box on this and not do what everybody else has been doing, but just incorporate it into our propagation plan to help the harbor be more naturally reproductive.
Okay, that's at the select board meeting tomorrow night.
Yeah, tomorrow
By
night, 7
Zoom?
o'clock here and on Zoom.
I just have a question or suggestion for a future topic. So from the May 11th meeting, there was a discussion of the combo reg. And I mean, maybe it's a moot point at this
Mhm.
time because ARC had their license revoked.
Mhm.
But in terms of a reg that would, incentivize research in the harbor, since, I mean, as far as I know, there's none going on. Maybe we should just have a discussion about that combo reg, because it was, I thought, continued from that meeting on May 11th. It is all written up already, so
Mhm.
something we could talk about maybe.
There's research going on in Wellfleet and going on for the last 10 years.
Under the current research reg?
It's been going on for the last 10 years on my lease with Barnstable County. If you want all the paperwork, you can have it.
All right.
Okay, we've done razor clams, we've done blood clams, we've done steamers.
Yeah.
We just did a big thing on butter clams. We're on the 3rd stage on it, going into the 3rd stage. We know how long they live for, we know when they die, we know when they have to be planted so that they can be harvested at the right time, because they only make it to a certain size before they die. We've let them go all the way to the point where they let them die, so that we knew how long they lasted. We ended up with some seed in November. It was our last plant of them, and they did not succeed because it was too late in the season for the size that we planted them. Because for the time window that they're supposed to run for, to get them to maturity for the best price, in other words, the size and the price. We tried November because the other ones over exceeded themselves that we planted prior to them.
That's CMAC, you said, was doing this?
So this is Barnstable County.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of documents on it, so there has been research going on. And it's, every leaseholder in the town of Wellfleet has the right to do it with them, and anybody else. You have the right to do it. You just get a amendment to your lease from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and you can do whatever you need to do.
Is there any hard shell disease research going on?
As we speak right now, I don't have any on my lease, but anybody has the option to do it.
ARC is working on it with the county and with Roxana Smallwoods from Roger Williams.
Damien's got his hand up over there.
Thanks, Bucky. I wanted to go back to just the previous discussion about nitrate loads, and maybe a future topic could be a flyer about kind of setting a culture of not over fertilizing and maybe not over spraying for pesticides, especially educating shoreside owners, property owners, and just trying to get ahead of that culture before this latest turn, turns differently. I don't think we want to end up with the green lawns of Chatham,
Absolutely. That might be something to liaise with like the NRAB or maybe some of the other conservation. Okay, thinking natural resources like protect the environment, but yeah, Conservation Commission.
So for what Nick suggested, you guys should all still have that draft. Regulation.
Emails.
Actually, but some people might be new, like you and Ethan might not have been on here, so I'll
resend. Okay. So the next thing to do is to figure out when we're going to have our next meeting. We have traditionally skipped August, it being a particularly busy time. Right. If we can squeeze something in early July and then go till September, we'll have a good window of work time.
The other thing that I was going to offer, I sent around the regulations to people, and I just was going to offer, if anybody wants a printed copy, let me know, and I can do that and get it to you because it's very long. Okay. The regs.
Yeah, if you don't mind.
No.
Here's the low tides.
There we go. Negatives.
Very light meeting.
Can't highlight on my computer screen.
3 a.m.
They'll be in September. It's okay. It's August, they let it go. That's good.
Morning. So yeah, I'm trying to say that like,
Get big tides in the middle of the month.
yeah, and I'm sure none of us want to come in after doing big tides.
No
so-
way. It's the last week of the month, like,
Yeah,
that's what we're probably gonna be stuck with.
yeah, the PM low tides are more like a 1.5. 6.
0.6 in the evening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like maybe the 26th or the 27th. 26th. Looks like it's a 1.9 at 5 in the evening. And the next day, 5:48 is a 1.8. So that would be like Tuesday or a Wednesday.
So that 5 o'clock ain't gonna affect anybody for 7 o'clock because. You know what I'm saying? It's- it's what's gonna- yeah.
Awful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so
Sounds
like,
good.
let's go for like the 26th.
26, okay.
Of July.
Yeah.
7 PM.
Yep.
That's a select board meeting.
Oh, all right, the 27th it is.
Do the day before.
I'm not sure I
Do
can do
Monday?
that just because I don't, it depends on who's in and who's out. Just, you guys
Okay.
can do it and then,
All right, so what
I-
does the 25th look like here? Oh, it's
I
a
can't
2
do
at
the
4:20.
25th, sorry. I
I
have
can't do
a
the 25th.
funeral.
either. Okay. All right, so let's try for the 27th and see how that looks.
7 PM here.
But I'll miss the time.
Are we doing 7?
7.
Yeah.
And I'll have to check to see if the room.
It's a morning tide that day, right?
2 tides that day.
0.8.
On the 27th, there's a 0.8 at 5:50 AM.
50 sunrise is like right around there.
Yeah.
Okay, so in other words, we have the ability to do something.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So let's move to adjourn this thing at a couple minutes after 9.
I second.
All in favor? All right. We will shore up the agenda sometime.
All right, thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you. Out of here. Thank you for joining us on the Zoom, folks.